Stonefield, Alabama. 5:45 a.m. Novacore Tower, the city's largest financial headquarters. While the executives slept soundly in their high-rise suites, a woman in a faded uniform quietly pushed a janitor's cart through the glass doors. No one knew her name, no one greeted her, no one ever imagined. She was the co-founder of the very building they worked in, and today, she's taking it all back. Stonefield, Alabama. 5:45 a.m. The sky hadn't fully brightened yet. Streetlights still cast shadows of trees onto the glass walls of Novacore Tower, the most dazzling office building in the city. While the entire financial district remained half asleep, an early bus pulled away from its final stop. She stepped off. A black woman, just past 50. A worn grey coat over a faded uniform dulled by years of use. White sneakers turned grey with age, soles worn nearly flat. She pulled a rickety cart filled with window cleaner, paper towels, and a mop bearing a wet floor sign. The glass doors opened automatically. She walked in. No one greeted her. No one asked her name. People called her Miss Loretta. Not Loretta Hayes, not Ms. Hayes or Mrs. Loretta. Just Miss Loretta, a name that floated between hallways and the break room coffee machine. She never asked for more. She arrived earlier than anyone. Every morning, while marketing staff were still hitting snooze, while investors sipped machine-brewed coffee at home, Loretta had already begun her day, mopping the second-floor hallway, wiping elevator glass, cleaning up pastry crumbs someone left behind the night before. No one paid attention to her, and that was precisely why she heard more than anyone. Through frosted panels, through conference doors left slightly ajar, Loretta moved past conversations people never bothered to whisper. They laughed, bragged about contracts, complained about staff, said cruel things, never once thinking about the woman behind the cart. She's just the janitor. Stick to mopping, Miss Loretta. Don't leave streaks on the floor. We've got clients at 10. Loretta didn't reply. She just nodded quietly, scrubbed a little harder, and kept pushing the cart forward. Her face calm, not bitter, not resigned. Just her eyes. Those eyes no one ever truly looked into. Always quietly watching, and for 15 years she walked past people who never really saw her. But then one morning, as the first rays of sunlight touched the Novacore logo etched into the glass, the phone in her jacket vibrated. A single message appeared. "We're ready, just say when." Loretta turned off the screen, slipped the phone back into her pocket, and continued walking as if nothing had happened. But this morning, those worn soles weren't just crossing cold tile. They were walking toward something no one saw coming. The tiled floor of the third-floor conference room always had a faint scuff mark near the base of the large table, left behind by the wheels of an old leather chair. Loretta wiped it clean every morning, though she knew the mark would never go away. Just like some things, no matter how much you scrub, never really disappear. For 15 years, she had moved through every tile, every dust line, every soft click of glass doors closing behind her. Each day, like a film looped on repeat, clean one floor, then push the cart to the next. No one called her by name. No one asked, "Are you doing okay?" Maybe because they thought she was part of the building, like the elevator, like the sinks, like the floors, expected to be clean but never acknowledged. But inside Loretta, there was one thing that had never been cleaned away. 13 years ago, also at Novacore, but in a remote warehouse branch, Loretta had met a young driver named Jared. His skin was sun-darkened, a radio slung constantly across his back. He was different from the others, always nodded when he passed her, sometimes even stopped to chat. One day, Jared approached Loretta while she was scrubbing the steps. In his hand was a complaint form. "Miss Loretta, I know you know someone at corporate. Please, can you pass this along? My area's dangerous, rusted containers, faulty cranes. Last week, a buddy of mine almost lost his hand." Loretta clutched the paper. She looked into the boy's eyes. Young, trusting, searching for a door. But she was afraid. Afraid of being questioned. Afraid of being noticed. Afraid of being exposed. "I'm sorry, Jared. I can't." He nodded, reluctantly taking the form back. "It's okay. I'm used to it." A week later, Jared had an accident. A container latch failed during a night shift. A steel bar shattered his shoulder, damaged his spine. No one claimed responsibility. Jared was dismissed for being no longer fit for duty. His name disappeared from the system as if he had never existed. Loretta heard about it in passing, whispered by another warehouse worker. She could still remember how the paper had scraped against her palm. She could have done something. She should have done something. But she chose silence, and from that day forward, Loretta wasn't just wiping up stains on tile. She was scrubbing away a slow-burning guilt inside her. She never told anyone. No one mentioned Jared again. But every time she bent down to clean spilled coffee or scraped dried gum from beneath the meeting room table, she saw his face, as if reflected in a dust-covered mirror. And eventually, even the best cleaners have to admit that some stains can't be erased, only faced. Montclair, Georgia, 1998. Before Nova Corps ever existed, before anyone knew Loretta the janitor, there was a woman sitting at an old kitchen table holding a notebook, eyes following every line her husband was writing with a blue ballpoint pen. Malcolm Hayes, tall, steady, and the kind of man who never read a book without underlining the best parts. They didn't have much, just a small sum Loretta had received after her father passed. Barely enough for a down payment on a house. But Malcolm had an idea, and Loretta, as always, didn't need to hear the whole thing before she nodded. "Put it in your name," she said. "You sure? You're the one who needs to be out front. I'm the one who knows how to keep it running straight." That's how Nova Corps Financial began. No office, no name recognition, just a logistics plan scribbled on the back of a grocery receipt, and a quiet love between two people who believed in each other. Malcolm ran operations. Loretta handled accounting, drafted contracts, built pricing models, all under the guise of a shell company. She stepped into the background, but never left the control panel. Then, one spring night in 2004, the phone rang at 2 a.m. Malcolm wasn't coming home. A semi had skidded on I-85. The co-driver survived. Malcolm did not. The funeral was brief. Clint Wallace, the other co-founder, gave a short, flat speech, as if Malcolm were just a line item on a tax form. No mention of Loretta, no mention of what she had built. Just silence. And then, she was shut out. Her company email vanished. Access revoked. Clint filed an ownership amendment, intentionally erasing Loretta's name from every internal document. But Clint had made one mistake. Loretta wasn't empty-handed. She kept the original founding contract, kept the signed power of attorney Malcolm had prepared before his death, kept every receipt she'd paid out of pocket. When the company didn't even have a bank account, she had enough to sue, enough to take the company back right then. But Loretta didn't. She looked at the stack of files and understood. If I step in now, they'll say I'm paranoid. They'll erase the past and paint me as an ambitious widow. But if I stay silent long enough, they'll reveal who they really are. So Loretta vanished from the company's spotlight, and years later, on a small bulletin board at the Stonefield Community Library, she saw a printed notice, "Now hiring, night janitor, Novacor Financial." She circled it in red ink. 2 days later, Loretta Hayes, no title, no paperwork, walked into the building she had helped create, wearing clean shoes and a grey uniform. And that's how 15 years of silence began. But it was never meaningless. Novacor Tower, basement level, 2 a.m. The building was silent. No more clacking keyboards. No more heels tapping across polished stone. Only the soft squeak of wheels on tile and the warm glow of hallway lamps. Loretta quietly pushed her janitorial cart up to the door of conference room 508, where the executive team had just finished a strategy session. On the table, half a sandwich, an unfinished cup of coffee, and a USB drive left next to a laptop. She didn't touch it. She didn't need to, because for the past 10 years, Loretta had been collecting everything she needed, in ways no one ever expected. Every night, she walked through internal conversations no one bothered to hush. After all, who would care about an old janitor mopping the floor? Who would think she understood financial jargon? Who would believe she remembered every number? But she did. She remembered. She recorded. She kept. In the supply locker down in the basement, beneath a pile of gloves and cleaning rags, was a sealed plastic box. Inside, a black leather notebook. No name, no decoration. Just handwritten lines, carefully penned. February, Blake Stratton told the CFO, "Cut low-tier bonuses. No one notices that stuff." June, slip and fall incident in the warehouse. No report filed. Brenda was present. August, Celeste Drayton remarked, "Janitors clean, not comment on the system." I was wiping the glass right next to her. Each page, a puzzle piece in the larger picture. A company once built on trust, now painting over its reputation with budgets cut from employee meals. Loretta didn't just write. She recorded audio with a clipped mini recorder hidden in her shirt pocket. Snapped photos of bulletin boards with an old phone. Backed up every file to an encrypted hard drive. Tucked behind a loose wooden panel beneath the ground floor sink. A sink no one had ever bothered to fix. She didn't do it out of anger. She did it out of clarity. Because truth doesn't need to be loud. It just needs not to be buried. And when Loretta finished wiping the coffee stain near the top 10 leaders of the quarter wall, she looked up at something else, a framed photo of CEO Blake Stratton shaking hands with a foreign investor. Caption, "Blake Stratton, the face of sustainable leadership at Novacor." Loretta smiled, not with sarcasm, but like someone who knew something the world hadn't figured out yet. One day, the very stains they left behind would become undeniable evidence. And Loretta, the woman they never once looked in the eye, would be the one to wipe away every layer of their mask. Tuesday, 3:17 p.m. Loretta had just finished mopping the third-floor hallway when she saw something strange. A paper plate placed dead center on the walkway, holding half a slice of chocolate-frosted birthday cake, with a plastic fork stabbed crookedly into the soggy middle. Not on a table, not beside a trash can, but right in the middle of the hallway. The exact spot where someone was most likely to step. The way it sat there. It hadn't been dropped. It had been placed, deliberately, to see who would bend down. Loretta paused, eyes fixed on the plate. Then she crouched, picked it up like she always did, and slid it into the tied-up trash bag at the back of her cart. "You missed a spot." A voice rang out from the end of the hall, even, cold. Blake Stratton, grey suit, hands in his pockets, a smile curled on his lips. The kind that pretended to be humorous, but only punched downward. Loretta turned her head slowly. "I'm sorry, sir, what did you say?" Blake stepped closer, the hallway light gleaming off the lensless glasses he wore just to look intellectual. "Right there," he pointed at a clean corner of the carpet. "We've got a client presentation coming up. Mind going over it again? Real thorough this time." Loretta looked down. The carpet was spotless, no dust, no marks, only disrespect. And sometimes what you can't see is what lingers the longest. She straightened her back, one hand gripping the cake plate through the trash bag, the other clenched around the mop handle. She said nothing. Blake remained as if waiting for the usual performance. The bow, the yes, sir. "Honestly," he said, "sometimes I think you janitors pretend to clean just to drag out the hours. Extra pay doesn't make a difference anyway." Loretta blinked once, no expression. "Who exactly are you talking about?" "Oh, come on now, don't get sensitive. I'm just saying. If you cleaned better, I wouldn't have to double-check your work, would I?" "I'll clean it again." There it is. Now that's the service spirit. Blake offered a smile, just offensive enough to wound, but not enough to sue, and walked away. Loretta stood still, watching him go, not angry, not biting back, but something inside her had shifted, not because of the cake, not because of the words, but because of one simple truth. He was no longer afraid. In Blake Stratton's eyes, Loretta wasn't a person, just a utility, a mop with legs. That night, Loretta didn't go home right away. Using a temporary employee badge a manager had once left behind in the restroom, she slipped into the internal records room. In the dim glow of the printer screen, she pulled the previous quarter's payroll report, a detailed breakdown of benefit cuts, and a bonus summary that read, "Blake Stratton, $55,000, Q performance bonus." In the same quarter, employee lunch budget cut by 30%. Driver overtime frozen. Janitorial staff received no raise in 4 years. She photographed everything, printed hard copies, folded them carefully, and slid them into an envelope labeled Victor Sloan. That evening, while washing her hands in the locker room, Loretta looked in the mirror, not to check for stains on her face, but to look directly at the woman who had waited long enough. 6:52 a.m. Novacore basement locker room. The fluorescent lights above flickered, casting a dim, uneven glow across the rows of aging metal lockers. The scent of bleach still lingered in the air. Loretta placed her rubber gloves on the shelf and was just about to open her locker when she heard it. The faint sound of stifled sobs coming from the far end of the room. Isabel Mendoza, the petite woman with her hair always tied back, worn-down shoes, and a smile that never fully reached her eyes, was curled up on a bench, face buried in her hands, shoulders trembling with quiet grief. Loretta walked slowly toward her. She said nothing. She knew there were moments when people didn't need questions, they just needed someone near. After a while, Isabel looked up, eyes red and swollen. "It's my son. He had an accident yesterday, broke his leg, fractured his pelvis. Doctor says he needs surgery. I asked for 1 day off, just 1 day, to be at the hospital with him. They said no, said they couldn't cover the shift." Loretta tightened her grip on her bag strap. not out of surprise, but because she'd heard this story before, and it was still happening. They told me I could take the day, but it wouldn't be paid, and they can't promise I'll keep my shift next week. I can't afford to miss work. I don't have a choice. She couldn't finish the sentence. In Loretta's mind, a flash of Jared came back like a sharp beam in the dark. His eyes clutching a form no one would accept. His bandaged body on a stretcher. The way the entire system had seen him not as a person, but as a liability. Loretta stood, said nothing to anyone, didn't grab her supplies. She opened her locker, pulled out her old phone, and dialed a number she knew by heart. Victor Sloan. I'm here. Get ready. You're sure? I'm sure. A pause. Loretta, after this, there's no going back. I never walked in to go back. She hung up. Back in the locker room, Loretta pulled out an envelope. Inside, a copy of the original 1998 founding contract. Malcolm's signature, a notarized stamp, and the clause transferring voting power to her after his passing. Proof she had kept for 15 years, like keeping a promise. Loretta put her coat back on, and her eyes. They no longer held the gaze of someone who just mopped floors. They carried the gaze of a woman, ready to wipe the system clean and write something new. A small diner tucked behind a gas station off US Highway 280. Outside, a neon sign flickered weakly. Inside, faded red plastic booths, a clattering coffee machine, and just two customers seated in the far corner. One of them was Loretta Hayes. She wore a faded ball cap, an old jacket, and cradled a worn brown briefcase with peeling leather edges. Across from her sat Victor Sloan. No tie, no laptop, only a simple case and the calm eyes of a man long familiar with the spaces between law and silence. This is everything. Loretta opened the case. Inside, the original 1998 NovaCore founding contract, signed by Malcolm Hayes. The notarized power of attorney transferring voting rights after Malcolm's death. The black notebook documenting every internal violation. Copies of emails, internal financial reports, audio recordings. And a duplicate of Loretta Hayes's employee ID, her real name. No longer Miss Loretta. Victor flipped through each page, wordless. Occasionally he paused and frowned. Finally he closed the case and looked up. I can file in court within 48 hours, if you want to make this public. I don't need a courtroom, Loretta replied, voice soft but steady. I don't need headlines, I need results. Then, we call a shareholders' meeting, internal, by the book, everything legal, but no one gets advance notice. No notice to the executive board. I want them to think I'm still mopping floors at 10 a.m. And after that, I move for a vote of no confidence. You realize, if you do this, the whole building will shake. Not will, it is shaking. They just haven't noticed yet. Victor smiled, for the first time since entering the diner. I'll send the emergency meeting request, under controlling shareholder authority, and prepare the paperwork to replace the CEO. That night, Loretta returned home and opened a small wooden box in the back of her closet. Inside, a black and white photo of Malcolm, smiling brightly beside the table where they signed their first contract. She placed her hand on the photo and whispered, I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it because what you built has been twisted. And because people like Jared should have been protected. At dawn the next morning, as sunlight crept over the Stonefield skyline, an internal email went out to 12 board members. Subject urgent, special shareholder meeting request, filed by controlling shareholder. Time, Friday, 10 a.m. Location, 8th floor conference room, Novacore Tower. No one questioned the sender's name, because none of them ever thought. That name still existed. Friday, 9:12 a.m. Novacore Tower buzzed with its usual end-of-week finance chaos. Meeting rooms were plastered with presentation slides. Employees scrambled to revise last-minute reports, and the sharp clack of heels echoed off cool marble floors. No one noticed the woman who stepped through the main lobby. But today, she wasn't pushing a mop cart. She wasn't wearing a faded grey uniform. She didn't lower her head toward the basement. Loretta Hayes, in a deep navy blazer, crisp white-collared shirt, polished black shoes, free of a single speck of dust, walked straight past the reception desk like the founder she truly was. Still, the attendant behind the counter instinctively called out, "Ma'am, this area isn't for—" She didn't stop. She simply looked, directly. And smiled, a small nod, then kept walking. The elevator doors opened. Someone stepped out, but no one stepped in with her. No one thought to share the elevator with someone they didn't recognize. She pressed floor 8. The doors closed. The soft chime of elevator music played. And throughout the building, everyone still assumed Loretta Hayes was scrubbing toilets on the second floor. 9:57 a.m. 8th floor, boardroom. The 8-meter-long walnut table, imported from Seattle, still gleamed with polished oils. On the table, printed quarterly agendas, talking points rehearsed and ready to be read aloud. Blake Stratton stood at the head of the table, tie loosened, stroking his chin as usual. Celeste Drayton checked her phone. Clint Wallace sat at the far end, flipping the folder cover with visible irritation. No one knew that in just 3 minutes, everything they thought they knew about this company would collapse. 10 a.m. The door opened. Loretta walked in, calm, carrying a black-bound folder. No one stood. A few furrowed their brows. Celeste leaned toward Blake and whispered, "Who let janitorial in at this hour?" Blake didn't even turn around, just waved a hand dismissively. "Maintenance comes after meetings. Just have her—" "I'm not here to clean your floors." The words cut through the room, not loud but sharp as a blade. Every head turned to Loretta. She stepped to the end of the table, opened the folder in front of her. At that moment, Victor Sloan appeared in the doorway behind her. "Good morning, everyone. I'm Victor Sloan, legal counsel to Ms. Loretta Hayes, majority shareholder of Novacore Financial. We are formally initiating an emergency board meeting with a motion of no confidence against the current CEO." No one reacted. No one moved. Because no one had seen this coming. But Loretta had been waiting 15 years for this very day. 10:01 a.m. 8th floor, Novacore Tower. No one spoke. No one moved. No one even breathed naturally. The name Loretta Hayes had just been spoken, not as a janitor, but as the majority shareholder. And suddenly, this once impervious room felt suffocatingly small. Blake Stratton stood frozen, as if struck in the spine. Celeste Drayton lowered her phone mid-scroll. Clint Wallace visibly paled. "What kind of joke is this?" Blake broke the silence with a strained laugh. Victor Sloan didn't flinch. "This is no joke. All legal documentation has been verified. Under Clause 4B of the 1998 Novacore Founding Agreement and a valid notarized power of attorney from the late co-founder Malcolm Hayes, Ms. Loretta Hayes now holds controlling shares and the unilateral right to call an emergency shareholder meeting." Loretta stepped forward. She opened the black folder and pulled out the original founding contract signed by Malcolm Hayes, a notarized copy of the power of attorney, a legal brief confirming her voting rights. She didn't look at the documents, she looked at each person in the room. And for the first time in 15 years, they were forced to look back. Clint stammered, "This can't be, this isn't possible." Loretta locked eyes with him. "You remember, don't you, Clint? You helped Malcolm draft the transfer clause. You were the one who suggested I temporarily step back for ease of operations. And then, you erased me." Clint said nothing. Blake, regaining some composure, raised his voice. "I don't know what this scheme is, but we're in a board meeting. You have no standing." Victor cut in calmly, like confirming a reservation. "Ms. Hayes submitted official notice 48 hours ago to the entire board. This session is fully lawful, and she has the right to call a vote of no confidence against the acting CEO, Mr. Blake Stratton." The room split in two. On one side, those who had assumed power was theirs by default. On the other, the woman who had once mopped beneath their shoes, now standing eye to eye, with the power to remove the entire system. Loretta pulled a thin file from her folder. Her voice wasn't loud, but each word landed like reinforced concrete. "For 15 years, I've watched Novacore drift from the thing my husband and I built. I've seen you award yourselves tens of thousands in bonuses while cutting employee meals, firing drivers for speaking up, denying time off to a mother whose son was in surgery, and turning this company into a place where people like Jared were left to become statistics." Blake leaned forward, face red. "What are you talking about? Jared, who—" "Don't pretend." Loretta cut him off, eyes unblinking. "You all remember. You just didn't care." Victor handed each person a sealed envelope, a dossier of violations, proof, internal reports. No one opened theirs. They didn't have to. One look at Loretta told them playtime was over. "I call for an immediate vote," Loretta said. "All those who no longer have confidence in Mr. Blake Stratton as CEO, raise your hand." For the first time in his career, Blake Stratton couldn't control a room from the head of the table. One by one, hands began to rise. Even Noah Kim, the youngest board member, didn't hesitate. Celeste looked around and slowly, reluctantly, lifted her hand. Blake stared, eyes wide, mouth trembling. "You're all ungrateful. You'll regret letting some janitor run this company." Loretta stepped forward, stopped just behind him. "I'm not here to run a company, Blake. I'm here to restore what was built with the sweat and blood of decent people. Something you never understood." Victor gave a nod. The door opened. 2 security officers stepped in. "Mr. Blake Stratton, based on the board's vote, your executive contract is hereby terminated effective immediately." Blake sprang from his chair, but there was nowhere to go. No one in the room stood up for him. He packed his things in silence, the same silence Loretta had endured. For 15 years, and for the first time in his life, Blake Stratton walked out of a room, with no one following behind. The boardroom door clicked shut behind Blake Stratton, and it was as if the air inside the room had been drained out and replaced with something heavier. The weight of truth. No more excuses, no more redirections, only the undeniable presence of a woman they had ignored for 15 years. Loretta began to walk around the long walnut table, slowly but with unwavering steadiness. She was no longer Miss Loretta. She had never been just the janitor. She looked at each person in the room. She didn't rush. She didn't give a speech. And then Her voice rang out, soft even, but sharp as a razor gliding across glass. 15 years. You never saw me. I scrubbed the stains you left behind, picked up the crumbs from parties you don't even remember who cleaned. I stood nearby while you plotted to fire someone, just because they dared to ask why their pay didn't match the industry average. I heard you call drivers replaceable wheels, called janitors an overhead burden. She placed her hand on the table, the very table she had scraped old chewing gum from beneath. Countless nights. You didn't see me, not because I wasn't there, but because you chose not to. Because my existence made you uncomfortable. Because I was a living reminder that someone still had to clean up what you tried to hide. Clint Wallace looked down, pale as ash. Celeste Drayton sat with her arms crossed, but her fingers trembled ever so slightly. No one protested. No one said, "That wasn't me." Because they knew, and they had let it happen. Loretta continued, "I didn't stay silent because I was weak. I stayed silent so you could show the world who you really are. Because if I had spoken up in year one, you'd have brushed me off as an angry woman. But 15 years of silence, that's not emotion, that's an indictment. And you signed your names to it." She opened her briefcase once more and pulled out one final document, a report, a quarterly breakdown of employee benefit cuts, lined up against executive bonus increases, black and red charts, a profit curve soaring upward, a human cost curve plunging downward. "This is the company you ran, but it is not the company my husband and I built. Novacor was once a dream, for workers who counted every dollar with pride. You turned it into a place where apathy became a job requirement." Loretta closed the folder. She didn't need to say more. She didn't need to summarize, because her presence was already the conclusion. Victor Sloan looked at her, nodded gently. "Would you like to take a few days off?" "I took 15 years off, Victor. Now I work." Loretta turned and walked to the far end of the table. No one looked away this time, because for the first time, they understood the person they had called invisible was the only one who had seen everything. 8th floor, Novacor Tower, 10:24 a.m. The boardroom doors opened once more. Blake Stratton stood at the threshold, gripping his phone tightly, his face flushed with anger, still trying to wear the look of a man who hadn't lost. "You think you can throw me out of this company with a few pieces of paper? I'm the one who got Novacor into that finance magazine last year. I made the 40 under 40 list. I am the face of this brand." His voice echoed down the hallway, like he was performing for an imaginary crowd, waiting for applause that never came. Inside the boardroom, no one responded. Only Victor Sloan, holding the termination notice, read calmly and deliberately, "By valid resolution of the Board of Directors this morning, and under authority of the controlling shareholder, Mr. Blake Stratton is hereby terminated from his executive contract, effective 10:21 a.m. today." Blake narrowed his eyes at Loretta. "You can't do this. Who even are you? Some mop lady who thinks she has power?" Loretta stood, not with rage, not with triumph, just a calm, deliberate presence. She said one sentence. Soft, but it landed like a hammer. "I don't think I do. I do." Two security officers appeared, not summoned by shouting, but by an email sent 5 minutes earlier with the subject, "Personnel Action, High Security Protocol." They didn't touch Blake, didn't speak, they just stood there. A silent final punctuation mark. Blake glanced around for allies. Celeste Drayton looked down, pretending to check her calendar. Clint Wallace clutched the armrests of his chair, eyes averted. Noah Kim sat still. His hand had gone down long ago. No one stood. No one spoke up for him. No one owed him loyalty anymore. "You'll all regret this," Blake hissed. Then turning to Loretta one last time, his voice like venom through clenched teeth. "You think you can do better than me? You're not a leader. You're the past. I'm the future." Loretta took one step forward. "If your future means cutting staff meals to raise your own bonus, then I'll gladly stay with the past." Blake slammed a folder onto the floor and stormed off. The slap of his dress shoes against the polished tile was sharp, rushed, and hollow. No one followed. No one watched. No one said goodbye. The elevator doors closed behind him. The digital display blinked. Ground floor. But in truth, he'd hit rock bottom. Inside the boardroom, Loretta bent down, picked up the folder Blake had thrown, and gently placed it back at the center of the table. She didn't look after him, because that battle was already over. The real cleanup was only just beginning. Monday at 9 a.m., Nova Core Tower, ground floor assembly room. No projector, no glowing slide deck, no gourmet coffee spread across a buffet table like in the usual executive meetings. Just a row of folding chairs arranged in a U-shape, natural light streaming in from the glass walls, and a whiteboard with handwritten words. Nova Core Assembly. Employees speak first. The first people to enter were visibly confused. A group of warehouse drivers, a few customer service reps, a woman from logistics still wearing her apron. Isabel Mendoza entered with Jamal Rivers, the driver who had spoken out 3 months ago about unsafe working conditions. No one knew why they'd been invited, and even more, no one understood why they were standing in a room that had never been meant for them. Then Loretta entered. No microphone, no podium, just Loretta. The woman they had once known as a quiet janitor, always nodding, never reacting. But now she stood in the center of the room, like it had been built for her to speak. She slowly swept her eyes around the room. They no longer found her unfamiliar. But now they didn't quite know what to call her. "I know many of you sitting here have never been invited to a meeting." "Neither was I." A few chuckled softly. "I worked here 15 years, and no one ever asked my opinion. Just like you. I'm not here today to give orders. I'm here to listen, because you're the ones who keep this company standing every day." There was no applause, just silence. But the kind that meant attention. Jamal raised his hand. "Ms. Hayes, the delivery department's overtime. Will it be restored?" Loretta nodded. "Overtime has been reinstated, and back pay for the last 2 quarters will be included in this Friday's payroll." Isabel stood slowly. "About emergency leave. I heard someone was denied time off when their son was in the hospital." "That won't happen anymore," Loretta said. "We're establishing an emergency employee assistance fund. Each case will be reviewed personally, not through some cold third-party system." A woman from the old HR team, Rachel Moore, stood and stammered, "Employee insurance. It's been reduced over the years. Many packages were cut." "I know," Loretta replied. "We've terminated the contract with our previous provider. This week, every employee will receive an individual survey on their actual insurance needs. We'll renegotiate based on what fits your lives, not the lowest bidder." Silence, then the sound of chairs shifting. People glanced at each other. Nods, small murmurs, faces slowly opening, as if daring to believe it was real. Someone from the back, a former tech department employee, called out, "Are you, like, the actual owner of the company?" Loretta smiled, soft like a quiet confession. "I always have been. I just don't stand behind the door anymore." The room froze for a moment. Then, as if someone had flipped a switch, applause, not loud, not staged, but the kind of applause that comes when someone finally sees their own voice reflected in the person standing before them. Loretta raised a paper cup to chest height. "Today we begin again, from the roots, from the voices of those who were once forgotten." 3 days later, a narrow street in South Stonefield. The rain had just stopped, leaving puddles glistening on the sidewalk. Loretta stood in front of a weathered brick single-story house. The porch roof slanted to one side. The house number was rusted. This wasn't a press event. There were no cameras, no PR advisors, just a woman stepping out of a car holding a white envelope, and a man emerging from the shadows, his gait uneven, his eyes once full of dreams, now guarded and tired. Jared, 13 years had passed, the young driver who once handed Loretta a letter, believing he was worth protecting, only to be chewed up by a system that never once apologized. Jared stopped at the edge of the porch. He recognized her immediately. Ms. Hayes. His voice was dry dash, like a door that had stayed shut for too many years. "I never thought I'd see you again." Loretta nodded. "I should have come sooner." They stood in silence. The rain began again, soft taps on the tin roof. Loretta held out the envelope. "This is a contract. I'd like to invite you back to NovaCore. This time as head of safety and compliance. Not to supervise, to change things. So you can be the voice I was too afraid to protect all those years ago." Jared took it, but didn't open it. "You know, every time I sat in that wheelchair, I used to wonder, if that day you had just said, 'Give it to me, I'll help,' maybe I'd still be walking today." Loretta tightened her grip on her bag. Her eyes didn't flinch. "I know, and I've thought about that question for 13 years. Jared exhaled hard, then sat down on the porch steps. She sat beside him, no umbrella, no further words. After a while he asked, "Why now?" "Because now I can guarantee there won't be another Jared." He turned to her, squinting as the rain began falling harder. "If I say yes, I don't want pity. I don't want a seat of honor. I want the right to yell when someone's about to be left behind." Loretta nodded. "Then come back. Be the first one who yells." That afternoon they sat beneath the rain-soaked roof. They didn't speak much more. But when Loretta stood to leave, Jared kept the envelope in his hands. He didn't tear it, didn't throw it away. He simply held onto it. And the next morning, in a freshly repainted office inside NovaCore's safety department, a nameplate was drilled into the glass wall. "Jared Thomas, head of safety and compliance." No more silence. NovaCore Tower, 1 month later. From the outside, the building didn't look much different. Still the same towering glass panels reflecting the Stonefield sky. Still the same parking lot filled with silver company sedans and high-end leased SUVs. But inside, everything had changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but like a room where the windows had finally been opened. After 15 years of stale air. Loretta walked through the ground floor hallway. The front desk receptionist, the one who once said, "You're in the wrong section," now stood and gave a respectful nod. "Good morning, Mrs. Hayes." For the first time, the name was spoken in full. Without omission, without distance. She nodded in return and kept walking. In the pantry, she passed Rachel Moore Dash, now a fully reinstated HR team member, explaining the new employee benefits plan to two fresh-faced interns. Jamal Rivers exited the elevator with a clipboard in hand, nodding at Loretta like family, and Isabel Mendoza, now promoted to supervisor of janitorial services, stood by the staff tablet, reviewing shift schedules. This building had once refused to see these people. Now they were the reason it worked. Loretta stopped by a glass panel in the corridor, the same spot where Blake Stratton had once publicly scolded her for. Missing a stain. Now, brand new carpeting, spotless, not because someone had been pressured to clean it again, but because those working here knew someone actually cared. A tall intern with a name badge that read M. Green slowed as he passed her. He hesitated, then asked, "Excuse me, sorry to bother you, but are you the one who replaced the CEO?" Loretta turned and her gaze softened. "I didn't replace the CEO. I just took back the keys from someone who didn't know how to use them properly." The intern gave a sheepish smile, then tilted his head. "So, who really holds the power here?" Loretta glanced around, at the employees working, at the drivers sipping coffee, at the janitorial team checking inventory in the supply room. Then she looked him straight in the eye. "Everyone does. As long as they remember, they deserve to." She walked on. No one called after her. No one needed to, because now the entire building understood. The woman they once thought only mopped the floors was the one who had held the keys all along. Friday afternoon, the back courtyard of Novacor Tower. No banners, no stage MC, no brand logos hanging high above the backdrop. Just a few folding tables, long rows of plastic chairs, and two food trucks filling the air with the scent of grilled meat, baked goods, and hand-poured coffee. No one wore suits, no one held a microphone, but everyone was there. From security guards to delivery drivers, receptionists to janitors, admin staff. They all showed up, each with a quiet hesitation, as if still unfamiliar with being invited instead of assigned. Then someone played soft music through a Bluetooth speaker tucked in the corner. Laughter followed, and suddenly, everything felt natural, as if it should have always been this way. Loretta sat at a worn wooden bench near the fence line. Not at the center, not needing attention, just watching. Quietly. Completely. She took a sip of coffee, then turned when she heard the gentle clink of metal against a soda can. Jamal Rivers, the transport driver who had once asked about overtime during that first meeting, raised his drink. To the ones who were forgotten. Loretta smiled and tapped her can softly in return, and to those who once stayed silent, but then chose to stand at the right time. In one corner, Jared sat with two new employees, explaining how to do proper safety checks in the warehouse, sketching a layout diagram onto a napkin. No one brought up the past, no one needed to. All they knew was he was trusted now, and he deserved to be. As the sun dipped slowly behind the glass tower, Loretta rose and walked toward the exit gate. People kept talking, kept laughing, kept eating, and no one stopped their joy to see her off. Because now she wasn't a figure demanding attention. She was the foundation, the anchor. And when a foundation is secure, it doesn't need to stand in the center to prove anything. As she approached her car, a young employee called after her, "Mrs. Hayes, you forgot this." She turned back. He was holding up a small, faded cleaning rag, the old familiar kind. She looked at it, then shook her head gently. Number, that belongs to the company now. They'll know how to use it. To clean what needs cleaning without forgetting who once held it first. Not everyone holds power. Not everyone is heard. And not everyone has the patience to wait 15 years just to prove they were right all along. Loretta Hayes didn't overthrow anyone. She simply put everything back in its rightful place, the place of justice, of kindness, and of the people who were once drowned by the so-called corporate culture, where value was assigned by job title and existence was determined by the color of your uniform. This is not just a story about a company being restored. This is the story of a woman who was once overlooked, but chose not to overlook others. A story about choices, silence or standing up, observing or acting, forgiving, but not forgetting. Because sometimes the one who changes an entire system doesn't need to enter through the front door. They don't need to bang their fists or carry a gold-plated business card. They only need to walk through enough forgotten corridors to know when they speak, their words will make every wall listen. And if you're somewhere in the world feeling invisible, disrespected, or overlooked, remember the janitor today could be the one holding the key tomorrow. The story ends, but Loretta's gaze still lingers as a reminder that sometimes what makes people change isn't a punch, but the quiet persistence long enough for no one to ignore it anymore. If this story left you silent for a few seconds after watching, share it. Because somewhere there's still someone like Loretta being forgotten, and they deserve to be seen.